Welcome, everyone, and happy Thursday. It is noon Eastern time, and you know what that means. It is time for your favorite show on the internet, a little program that we like to call Town Experience Live. I am your host, Devin Foster, and we have a fantastic episode for you today. Today, we are talking about how the interview process is quite simply broken. Candidates are looking for a fast and transparent process to move through things, not have to jump through hoops and everything in between. And I was fortunate enough to get my hands on a nice little recording of Sven Elbert, senior analyst at Fosway Group, and he touched base with Sebastian Niewöehner of Phenom. He is in the product management department. So we are going to listen to their conversation. It is one of my favorites. But before we get into that, of course, we have to pay the bills around here. Talent Experience Live is proudly brought to you by the good folks here at Phenom, whose purpose is to help 1 billion people find the right work. We do that through podcasts like the one you are about to see. We do it through this program, through Jess Elmquist's program, Smarter, and everything in between. But most importantly, we do it with our Intelligent Talent Experience platform, which helps candidates find the right fit faster. We're going to talk about that today with Sven and Sebastian. It helps employees evolve in their current roles and beyond. Recruiters become wildly productive through the help of automation and AI, and managers get better data and insights. Now, all of Phenom's Intelligent Talent Experience platform, of course, is powered by artificial intelligence and automation. So if any of this interests you at all, do not walk over to phenom.com to learn more. We put on tons of thousands of events. It feels like the most recent one is Skills Day, where we talk about how skills just aren't about employee experience or talent management. It encompasses the entire organization, and it's one way to help you move forward for future work. So definitely check that out at phenom.com. But in the meantime, please enjoy this episode with Sven and Sebastian. Here they are.
Welcome to today's podcast episode, powered and sponsored by Phenom, which is all about the hiring process and how to efficiently reduce time and cost to hire by still providing an excellent candidate experience. I'm Sebastian Niewöehner. I'm Senior Director Product Management here at Phenom. And with me today, I'm really excited to have Sven Elbert, Lead Analyst for Talent Acquisition at the Fosway Group. Hi, Sven. And probably to everyone who does not know you yet, briefly introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, Sebastian. Hi, everyone. My name is Sven Elbert. I'm the lead analyst for talent acquisition here at Fosway Group, Europe's #1 industry analyst. We work with a lot of organizations across HR, across talent acquisition, help them make better buying decisions and de-risk them. So thank you for the invitation, and looking forward to this.
Great. Looking forward to the conversation. And to everyone listening in, who is this podcast really for? So whether you are a recruiter, a hiring manager, interviewer, or a TA leader, every individual who really has a stake in the talent acquisition process should really listen in now. If you're looking to reduce total time and cost to hire, if you want to elaborate how to better collaborate and communicate within the interview process, or you actually want to make sure you upskill and up-level your candidate experience, we are really excited to discuss all these aspects today. And in this conversation, we will look into how candidates are screened, how interviews are actually scheduled and what this process looks like, and how interview teams, hiring teams are actually running the interview themselves. And when assessing this hiring process end to end, we will talk about the biggest challenges, the main challenges that organizations have right now, and also how to overcome them and how to look at this in a holistic view and introduce something called hiring intelligence. And that being said, Sven, why don't you start off with really sharing your experiences and your knowledge of what is it that companies and HR leaders really face today in the interview processes, and what are the challenges that they have?
Yeah, I guess with regards to interview processes, I mean, obviously there's probably an overarching theme at the moment, given the economic situation. Our research has found that organizations overall are under pressure to do more with less. HR and talent acquisition budgets are under pressure. Probably like they've never been before across the past few years. The pandemic obviously did a lot for digitization in HR and talent acquisition as well. But now I think there's a stronger emphasis on hiring the best fit. There's no room for error in this recessive economy. That definitely for interviews, then I guess that means that the quality of the interviews has to increase both systematically in terms of the outcomes it produces, but also systemically in terms of the efficiency, the tools that are getting used. And yeah, I mean, honestly, across the past few years, organizations, I guess, have done already quite a bit to improve the interview process. We've seen huge shifts. Obviously, during the pandemic, everything went virtual. We're still in a world where hybrid working, remote working is the reality for most desk-based workers. So definitely that has caused many shifts. And so many organizations have maybe made some steps up the maturity curve, I would say, and improved at least, a couple of things in their process across screening, scheduling, and interviewing. I mean, we can dive a little bit deeper as we go. But certainly, according to these outcomes and efficiencies, it's quite important at the moment that organizations look at that. And in the conversations we're having with HR leaders, with TA leaders, that is certainly one of the major themes going on at the moment as well.
So when you look at you just mentioned screening, scheduling, interviewing, what are the areas where you see the strongest demand at the moment in terms of optimization? You mentioned due to COVID, there was a big shift to live interviews, video interviews. That is kind of reverted a little bit, right? What is your perspective there in terms of what stays after COVID and what is kind of going back to previous?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we've all learned a lot, right? And digital maturity has increased. Everybody's kind of used to be sitting in front of a camera nowadays. So that has become more natural, has made things easier. In Europe in particular, I think, where it was always slower to adopt. I guess overall, our research shows that candidate experience is a big focus for organizations. 60% see improving the candidate experience as one of the top 3 kind of priorities for talent acquisition. And so, that obviously, if you break that down across the different stages in the selection process around screening, interviewing, scheduling, there's obviously a lot you can do for candidate experience. Candidates have different expectations as well. They want more transparency. They want to know where they stand. What are the next steps? Like, how long will this stage maybe take? When will I hear from you next as an organization, as my maybe future employer? And so candidates want it to be a faster process. In terms of points of engagement or touch points, maybe they also want, I guess, less interactions, but higher quality ones, more meaningful interactions. So I guess the worst thing is you can do to a candidate is kind of ask them the same questions 3 or 4 times during the different stages of the process. So I think that kind of annoys people nowadays. Yeah, so there's always an area where corporates can improve on the candidate experience journey, and I guess that has been a significant focus. In terms of outcomes, organizations need to mature in the interview practices as well. So a lot of the interviews are oftentimes a little bit unstructured, a little bit inconsistent. So many clients, corporate clients we've been speaking to, are now building out maybe some more role-specific interview guides, detailed interview questions that help the interviews then actually to deliver a more consistent experience. So I guess the question is, how do you upskill your interviewers, and what are the ways and the tools that you have at your disposal to do that? So the other thing probably is around automation efficiency. So that other equation that I touched on, I guess, here a lot of things have become possible through technology. A lot of things can be automated, scheduling, communication, obviously, and many organizations have adopted this. The last Fosway 9-grid report around talent acquisition spoke about, I guess, in one section around the interview revolution continues. So the general advice I would give is look at your technology, and buyers should embrace every improvement, I guess, that the technology can offer, because that has potential to improve a lot of the processes that exist. So every new release that vendors are putting out there is something for to improve interview management, interview scheduling, and those kind of capabilities.
I think these are very, very great insights. And coming back to the candidate experience that you mentioned, right, it's very important that the touch points are reduced, there's transparency in the process, but also the interviews are actually conducted in a lot better way, because we all know the challenge or the situation where interviewers are asking over and over and over again the same question, which is not a good experience. And I think because you mentioned various aspects here, let's try to break this down into something very, very straightforward. And we look at the candidate experience in 3 different stages, right? The first one is, once a candidate applies, there's the screening stage, which is, okay, how do you actually, once you applied, get into the process? What is the communication that is potentially automated by a company, but gives you still a very good experience, and you feel welcomed as a candidate at this organization? And then we start with the screening stage before we move over to the interview scheduling, a very burdensome process that exists at the moment in organizations. And then I think the very, very crucial topic, and what you call the interview revolution, continues. I think for me, it just gets started because the interview process itself, or interviewing candidates, is still very, very traditional. It moved from an on-site interview to a video interview, but the process itself, the interview itself, has not really changed a lot. But starting at the beginning, at the screening stage, so a candidate applies, and it's a first interaction with the employer here, with the organization. What do you see as the core challenges in terms of the recruiter experience, and the candidate experience, of how to make this really a very simplified first step in the process?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for keeping me on track there, Sebastian. That's really helpful. I guess in terms of the screening process, when you think about the application, right, this is usually done now, obviously, in an online way. Candidates are uploading a cover letter, a CV, when they're interested in a role. Maybe they're, doing this through their mobile phone and what have you. So obviously a lot of change there. But with the induction of generative AI into modern's world, and like everybody's speaking about this now, so I feel like I have to mention it too. Definitely more CVs, more cover letters are getting polished by generative AI. So the candidates are using that. And I think that is definitely something that organizations are becoming more aware of, and are kind of thinking through what they need to change because of that in their screening process. And I think if we look at, August, September 2023, that is probably one of the things you should really do and look at. I guess.
Sorry for the interruption. Is that already something, when you talk to the leaders, that they have solutions for, where they say, okay, we know a lot of candidates are using GPT. We actually get feedback from our customers and say, we do not ask certain long text questions anymore in the application process, because we know they all sound the same. So what is it that, or the answers actually are very, very similar, which
there's even like the idea that tools can perhaps find out if this is a generated answer to a question. I guess, in the wider picture, the CV, and maybe also the first screening step, the traditional phone interview, historically was there to get a better grip on the skills, the expertise of a candidate, to get some insights, to start a conversation. So I think, obviously, now that ability for recruiters to actually make an assessment based on the CV is significantly under pressure and at risk. So obviously more companies are looking to make changes in the process. Like you mentioned, a couple of things around the questions they're asking, which is very, very specific things, but also the tools that they use to assess candidates, maybe looking at assessment providers a little bit more, embedding them technically more deeply into the process, making sure they have the right assessment tools for the right roles, because there's a lot of different skills you might want to assess or might need to assess. Even in internal placement kind of situations, before you even maybe go outside, that is something where organizations are investing. So definitely, I think that is where people's headspace is at the moment. And I guess with regard to the traditional phone interview, These things are very time consuming, right? It meant that you had to go to so many candidates and interview them all, that you needed a lot of woman power or manpower to actually get the job done. So what I also recommend, I guess, is that corporates use one of the high volume cases that they might have to stress test the processes and the organization, the resources that they have, because there you can really see what works under significant pressure. And then the findings that you have in the high volume cases, obviously, if you have a hard to fill role, you don't want to necessarily use the same tools. You then want to make it personal. You want to provide a better experience, downscale the experience. But I guess that would be an approach, how organizations can actually start to look at improving these kind of things.
That's a very interesting angle, because if you look at it from a large scale, you identify the little gaps in the process, and you can see how to improve it, and take the learnings also for, if you look at the high volume position, and you take some of the learnings also to different job zones and more the knowledge worker gap.
Yeah,
I think
this is where you also have the greatest impact, right? Because there you have the volumes, right? And
there you have the volume, and they are like, on a large scale, you need to start automating certain things, right? Because then you give your recruiters, your talent acquisition team, more freedom to actually do meaningful work. And once you have something automated, how do you make this in the next step more intelligent, and you provide more context to make data-driven decisions? And I think what you mentioned there with the phone interview, it's a very, very time-consuming aspect, because it's not only the 30-minute interview. You also have to schedule with the candidate, you have to communicate with the candidate, where especially on the high volume, where we see a lot of our customers actually using one-way video interviews or one-way audio interviews, that kind of automates the entire process of getting to know the candidate in the same way they will actually appear in a live interview, where this technology, one-way interviews via video, audio, is something that we get a lot of very, very good feedback from, and especially in the high volume case, big efficiency increases.
Yeah, I guess when you look at scheduling these kind of things, and I guess this applies to both the screening and obviously the interview stage as well, there's often a lack of transparency, a lack of communication internally between the stakeholders. There's obviously also different types of interview settings. It's not always a one-to-one. Certainly that is still probably the predominant case, but there's also panel interviews, different things scheduled in sequence. You want to maybe have 2 or 3 interviews in a certain day with the same candidate. So I guess those are constant scheduling challenges, because people's diaries change, and you can't block out 3 days in a manager's diary nowadays, right? That's kind of impossible. Many organizations, I guess, are using tools to help with the scheduling automation. They have some flaws, I guess. You're sending candidates maybe to a different system. There's probably like legal considerations that you have to take into account. You don't always have access easily to the candidate profile, to the interview questions. So all of that is maybe then scattered across multiple places. So I guess even from that perspective, there's things that you can bring together in one place to make it a better, talking about experience, to make it a better experience for the interviewer, and then also for the candidate. I guess, it's one of the critical stages. A lot of organizations have actually dedicated jobs to schedule these interview scheduler jobs. I think they are already under pressure for a couple of years. AI maybe has the potential, if we look at the next 1 or 2 years, to actually truly change how these roles look like. Even maybe they vanish. So there's maybe an upskilling, reskilling challenge for the people in those roles today, to see what other activities they can help with in the talent acquisition team or in the wider organization. So definitely that is certainly an area of great disruption, this scheduling stage. I mean, today the tools definitely integrate well with Outlook, well with Google calendars or whatever. And even rescheduling is becoming easier nowadays, which in the 5 years ago was a big problem. If you had the first day kind of agreed between everybody, that was kind of great. But then when you needed to reschedule it, your ATS maybe wouldn't support that necessarily. So obviously there has been incremental improvements, which I said earlier as well. And I guess that is definitely something where organizations need to look at how this whole scheduling piece is evolving for them and what they want to do with it. I guess automation is certainly a big leverage for this area.
Fully agree. I think one important aspect as well here is that candidates highly appreciate this easy way of scheduling calls, because when we put ourselves into the shoes of a candidate, I want to get the interview scheduled as fast as possible, and I want to make sure I can talk to the interviewer, to the hiring team, and make the decision also for myself if this is the company I want to work for. And some other data that we actually see is that by automating the scheduling process, about 95% of all interviews are actually scheduled within the first 2 days, which is a very, very great sign for the recruiter and the candidate in the process, because it's all automated. And within 2 days, the process is given. And I think that's only for the scheduling process itself. But what we also hear, and I think you mentioned it in the very beginning of this conversation, in the interview scheduling process, it's not only about getting the date in the calendar on the calendar, but also for the candidate specifically, getting the transparency. Where am I in the process? Who am I going to, or who will be my interviewers? If it's an on-site interview, right? Even more information. Where do I have to travel? Is there any payback of expenses? Like a lot of these questions that candidates have in the current interview process, besides just when is this meeting going to happen, is something that we hear a lot from our customers. Say, we need a solution to really make sure candidates have a place to go. Similar to what you currently have as an online shop, you have your account where you go there, you have full transparency on all your orders. And how do you create something like this for the candidate itself to also take burden off the recruiters in communicating?
Yeah, I guess it's also like obviously a personal relationship building, very important from that perspective. So like you said, explaining who the person is that you're getting interviewed by, what their role is, providing a bit more context around that in advance to the interview. I guess this is just not only an act of courtesy, but also helps kind of to create that emotional contract, that psychological contract between the potential new employee and obviously the organization, right? And kind of try to get them deeper into the funnel psychologically, emotionally, is also quite important, because there's still a skills availability crisis here in Europe, right? People are desperately looking for workers in many industries, and people have job offers and interviews elsewhere as well. So like you said, this automation can also improve the speed, the velocity at which you hire. And I guess that is an important aspect of as well that automation can help with, is to accelerate this process and kind of make sure that you have the ability to to get those very talented candidates that are otherwise elsewhere.
When you talk to the leaders out there in the HR industry, what do you see as kind of the best practices? So when we look, we moved through the screen stage. We are now in the scheduling stage where interviews are being scheduled. What do you see as kind of the best practices, the top 3 ideas that you saw, to really make sure I'm ahead of competition, right? Because screening solutions and to some extent scheduling solutions exist. But it's really also how to implement it, how to make this a very humanized experience. What are the top examples that you came across so far?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, there's different aspects to mention here. I guess one is obviously embedding video messages into the communication, obviously branding those messages so that you have that personal touch. And with that comes obviously transparency about the next steps, preparation for the candidate, is an important part. Also from the corporation's perspective, preparing the interviewers, making sure that they know what questions to ask, that there's consistency about the questions that they're asking. So that helps to even provide before the interview takes place, so during the scheduling stage. And then certainly self-service. So I mean, let candidates choose the some might prefer a slot in the morning or in the evening rather than during the day. So giving them the flexibility in terms of the manager's diary is important. And the manager has the day job, right? The interviewer, they need to juggle this amongst whatever 50 other priorities that they have to work on every week, right? So I guess that is really important to have, you know, a smooth process around also managing their expectations around it. So as much as the technology can automate this, and perhaps I guess with generative AI, we are even at a situation where some of the communication can be taken over by the AI. So the automation potential is even greater. So I think that is also an area where a lot of corporates are interested in that. But many are relying on their vendors actually to bring out these kind of innovations or bring these innovations to them. So I think that is definitely some of the things where organizations are looking, or maybe waiting a little bit more instead of just, you know, jumping on, you know, ChatGPT and doing it manually or whatever, right? Because that again creates more work than maybe that it helps.
Fully agree with this, and I think especially two aspects that you mentioned, which we also see as key to up level the candidate experience, the candidate conversion rate through this funnel. I think on the one hand side is really video communication, where we see when a video is part of the initial screening solution, we sometimes even see customers having 10 to 15% better conversion rates, because it shows that I take a first step, and I as a recruiter, as a talent acquisition person, I take the effort and I want to create a personalized experience, even though I'm automating certain aspects. So this again comes to the magic loop. Even though certain things are automated, how do we create the experience around it that it's still a good experience, and we show the candidate, hey, we value you in this process. And the other one that you just mentioned at the end, the generative AI approach. How do we, as an organization, actually personalize the communication in a very automated fashion, as something that we, and you said this is normally up to the vendors, right? Which we have seen, and we are from the ground up an AI company by not just using GPT, but actually using all the data that is available in the system to make it a real personalized message that is not GPT based, but it actually has all the important context of the candidate's application, the candidate's CV, the candidate's current stage in the interview process, to create a message that really is personal and not just kind of created by AI, but not really a good message. That being said, right, when we talk about, or when we close down on the screening stage and the scheduling stage, and we move over to the interview stage, because you also said for hiring managers, they have their day-to-day job, right? And interviewing candidates is something that is probably very new for them, and a challenge, and something that takes practice, takes time to make sure you actually know how to identify a top talent, and how to also in this process create a good candidate experience. What are the big challenges, if you summarize it again, that you see in the interview stage itself? So once an interview is scheduled and there's the first, the second, the third interview round, what do you see as the big challenges here for organizations?
Yeah, I guess it's making, I mean, obviously this is a stage also where a lot of compliance kind of risk might be hidden. Obviously certain questions you cannot ask as an interviewer. So obviously that is something where already organizations are educating the interviewers for sure about these kind of topics. Definitely, I guess these interviews are, from the candidate's perspective, often repetitive. Like you get the same questions in the first interview, maybe in the second interview, maybe with that manager and that other manager. So is that really necessary? Can we not internally organize it in a better way so that we share what has been done with these interviews being recorded? This is becoming an option. so that actually managers or that candidates don't get asked the same question over and over again. So you can increase the transparency across those different interview events by sharing that, and also by looking at like what is a good interview. What are the? I mean, obviously you can prepare it by providing the right questions in advance, role specific questions, so that the managers have them on screen while they're doing the interview. Right. This if it's a virtual one, I guess this already helps quite a lot. But then obviously there's like how long somebody speaks, there's a bit of a sentiment analysis that can be done, those kind of things, which modern technology allows you to do. So I think that is the ultimate kind of goal, is to increase the quality and the consistency with which these interviews are conducted. So there's some, really interesting kind of solutions how organizations can then scale this process, right? How do you do this globally in a 200,000 kind of employee kind of company with whatever hundreds of interviews is a big kind of challenge. And then you do it for software engineers, you do it for finance people. So there's a lot of these kind of things where you can use these technologies to actually help you do these kind of things now in a much better and more efficient way. And also from a compliance standpoint, I guess GDPR puts out some important steps that organizations need to look at, but also making sure that you actually have the recording in the platform can help you with legal court cases, even 1 or 2 years later down the road. So I think thinking holistically about this and how technology can support the interview process is a big thing. Certainly there is, many organizations also who want to have the personal touch again, who want people to come back into the office, so meet the team kind of things. And those are the emotional experience, again, that help kind of build that psychological contract, are very important too. So I think technology is like maybe one answer to this, but also there's again a swing back into maybe personal, in real world kind of interview situations where companies are looking, can we dial that up a little bit more? Certainly that doesn't scale as well and is time consuming. So obviously you want to be conscious about when you're doing this, at what stage and with whom. But certainly, yeah, these are probably some of the observations I would make. Sebastian?
Yeah, thanks for these insights. And I think especially the fact that technology has to adapt in the interview process or to the interview process of an organization, right? Because we see, and also, and from with talking to our customers, or by talking to our customers, we see some of them moving back to on-site interviews, and it's probably like a 50-50, where depending on the position, the first interviews are done online, and then for the final interview, let's say we have that personal touch, because maybe even we bring all our employees back to the office. And what you described there, I think, can be very well put into, again, three simple buckets. On the one hand side, like how do you interview, how do you prepare interviewers, how do you provide a certain structure? It's all about interview preparation, right? Interview guides. How do you provide the right context? As you said, a lot of times questions are asked over and over and over again because the context is entirely missing right now. What happened in the first 2 interview rounds? I think here technology can really help to make sure, if I'm a hiring manager in the last round, I know what questions to ask, I know what questions have been discussed, and ideally, I can actually maybe even watch some of the recordings in the past. I remember the times where I was like, me reaching out to the recruiter, me reaching out to another interviewer, and kind of really trying to understand what is the feedback that you already gave, so I can be very precise in the next round. And that's something where I think the new term is kind of evolving in the HR industry, which is called interview intelligence, which is really all this, right? It's actually recording conversations, providing with intelligence, providing the right information in the dedicated stage, and allowing our HR or our hiring teams to really collaborate effectively and use available technology to be more informed and open up that big black box that currently exists between the scheduled interview and the final decision to hire.
Yeah, I guess, and Fosway obviously has quite a European-centered view around things. Obviously, here in Europe, the use of AI and tools that analyze the interview, the transcripts, and all of that, that is great and possible. But certainly, something if you apply it into Germany or into France, is something that you need to be extremely thoughtful of, because you have works council questions and those kind of things coming up. And from from that perspective, there's and this is true globally, there's always a human that is taking the final decision, right? These tools are only helping to improve the organization's maturity or to improve the candidate experience, and obviously it has to happen with consent. So the candidate has to give consent for the thing to. I mean, that is obvious, but it's probably worth mentioning that also that is something that you need to look for when you look at tools. Like, make sure that they're obviously compliant to your local kind of regulation and also compatible with your culture. Certainly, this is more difficult globally, because obviously globally there's different kind of cultures in every country. But definitely from the vendor perspective, we see that some of the more US headquartered kind of businesses who grow, or vendors who grow in that space, then have trouble kind of coming over to Europe, because it's a bit of a different culture over here around AI and that kind of stuff. So definitely, I think that is important for organizations to also consider when they apply technology, to make it fit for their kind of local needs and environments.
Fully agree. And I think as a German who grew in that culture, and we are both German, I think data privacy is something that is very, very important.
Yeah, people could tell by the accent, I'm sure.
But I think that aspect is super, super important when actually looking into technology, selecting technology, and saying, okay, is that something that will help us in the organization? And that's the same that we see. And talking to the companies in the US versus talking to companies in the German or European market, there's still a different angle to it, right? And also with a consent mechanism, while in the US, a candidate opt-out is totally fine and legally okay, where we inform a candidate about the recording up front. In Germany, it's kind of the other way around. The candidate clearly needs to give the consent, and I opt into this recording, which is thus, I think, if the provider itself provides these options, very, very clear for the organization and based on the work council and the legal departments, this can be set up. I think that's often more if the options are provided by the provider, by the technology provider. There's a lot more flexibility in how to make this work. And in addition to this, I think you mentioned something very important, is the human in the loop, right? Where I think especially in the interview process, technology is really there to make the interviewer more efficient and not to evaluate a candidate or take a decision in an automated fashion. That will not have an impact on the decision. It's more on the interviewer experience, and that being said, also the candidate experience in the interview process.
Yeah, I guess even sharing potentially examples of very good interviews internally prior to or when you want to upskill somebody is definitely a good idea, right? Because then people can see how others are doing it. And I mean, watching a video is one thing, but a skill is a skill. So a skill means it's not just knowledge in your head, it's something that allows you to act and to kind of put it into the real world, right? So then people need to be able to watch the content, but then on the other side have the opportunity to practice. So this is an important part of the learning experience and the upskilling mantra, I guess. And from that perspective, that is also something that some technology solutions out there already are starting to kind of think of and adopt into their kind of functionality set and capability set.
Great. I think that gave a very good overview now.
I guess we covered a lot, yeah.
In terms of how do a candidate move through the entire hiring funnel from screen to scheduling to interview. And we looked at the different aspects from the recruiter efficiency perspective, but also especially important the candidate experience, because as you said, talent is very rare in today's market, and that's why a good candidate experience is key to actually make a good hire. So you also said in the beginning, like top of mind of a lot of HR people is how are actually setting up, how do they set them up for success in the future, right? Maybe you can, to close this conversation, sum this up. What do you really see as the top 3 aspects that HR leaders need to cover? And how do they start tackling this, and what might be a good strategy to step by step get started on this approach?
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe coming back to like all the things we've covered, I guess don't feel intimidated by all the things that we've discussed, right? There's you don't need to solve the world all in one day, right? I guess align to the challenges that your organization has. Do it step by step. Do it for certain roles first. Do it for maybe the high volume first, or do it where you have the greatest pain points. So I think we didn't want to intimidate anybody by kind of going through this in the great length. But certainly in terms of what's top of mind for CHROs, I guess certainly budget pressure is, I guess, the thing. So there's possibly a bit of a need to keep the cost under control, both from a technology and from a resource perspective. So is there an opportunity potentially to consolidate your HR technology? This is certainly something that we have seen gone up in terms of the number of organizations who want to consolidate things into less platforms. And I guess the other thing is around skills availability. So what are the skills of the future? What are the things I need in 2 years, in 3 years' time? How can I start to hire for that already now? How can I embed those skills into my role descriptions and my job descriptions that I put out there, so that I can start to build and source some of the skills already now. Also internally, right? It's not just an external market question. It's also like, how do you upskill, reskill people that are already in the organization who have a lot of the background knowledge? So kind of from a talent acquisition standpoint, don't think of it in a silo. I guess also look at it how the learning functions, things about upskilling, reskilling, how you can work together. This, I think, is a lot where a lot of CHROs headspace is at the moment. How can they bring these things together in a holistic approach that covers it, like from even the planning stage and then through to the execution stage into talent acquisition and talent development, learning, and so on. I think that will be some of the I guess where a lot of the conversations are around. AI certainly is one of them. Having roundtables at the moment with a lot of corporates around the topic, and many are still kind of like, what do we do with this kind of thing? I guess the main approach that we're currently seeing is, okay, what do the vendors that we currently have offer? What is their roadmap? What are they starting to get out? And then how can we adopt it? How can we make that work for us? I think that is the predominant kind of sentiment, I think, that I would maybe transport back on that one, if that makes sense. But yeah, so I think that would be my response.
Great, thanks, Sven. And I think that is a perfect final statement of this conversation, of this podcast. We covered, as you said, a lot. We went through the 3 different stages: screen, scheduling, interviewing, and just re-emphasizing on the importance of like the recruiter experience, the candidate experience in this funnel, how to make this automated, how to make this still a humanized, personalized experience for all parties involved is a very key aspect, where I think the term hiring intelligence is key. Like, how do you create this intelligent hiring process that just upskills or uplevels the experience for all involved stakeholders, is something that we at Phenom kind of emphasize. And yeah, that being said, thank you for the conversation. It was a pleasure to have you here and to gain or to share all your insights with the audience. And Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you, Sebastian, and have a good day, everyone.
Love that conversation. I think talking about the candidate experience is something that we've done here at Phenom for years, and it's finally catching on throughout the industry, as Sven mentioned there and Sebastian talked to as well. If you are interested in learning more about Fosway, I know that they do a 9-grid. They are fantastic analysts in the industry. You can always head over to Fosway, their LinkedIn or their website to learn more, to check out their 9-grid, or perhaps schedule some time with them. But in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll, of course, have the blog recap. The podcast will be out later today for you to listen to if you didn't catch the entire episode. And you can always watch the replay on YouTube or here on LinkedIn. But in the meantime, I hope everyone has a safe, a happy, and a healthy weekend. Remember, snow always lands on top. And next week, we are going to be sharing some of the highlights of the year. We've been doing TXL for what feels like forever, but it's been about 3 years now. And we want to recap this past year because we've had some of our favorite guests on. So you won't want to miss that episode next Thursday at noon Eastern time, of course. And in the meantime, I hope everyone has a great weekend. Thanks so much. See you soon.